Mountain Man went to buy horses, saw a woman on fence, and bought her instead. The Mountain Man had lived all his life among the high peaks and rocky trails. His home was a small wooden cabin, tucked in a clearing between tall pines and steep cliffs. He knew every path, every hidden stream, and every animal in the forest. Life in the mountains was not easy, but it had taught him patience, strength, and the quiet joy of solitude. He was a man of few words, preferring the sound of wind through the trees and the rush of mountain streams to the chatter of townspeople. Yet, despite his love for the mountains, he had decided that it was time to visit the valley market. He needed horses, strong and healthy ones, to help him with his work. His current animals were aging, and the work of carrying supplies, pulling carts, and traveling long distances had begun to take a toll on them. The journey to the market was not simple. The mountain paths were narrow and uneven, lined with loose stones and twisted roots. Sometimes a misstep could mean a fall, and he had learned early in life to move with care, testing the ground with his boots before putting his full weight down. The early morning air was crisp and cold, carrying the faint scent of pine needles and the earthy aroma of wet soil. Birds called to each other from the treetops, and occasionally he would hear the distant cry of an eagle soaring high above the cliffs. Each sound was familiar, comforting even, and it reminded him of why he had chosen this life. As he descended from the higher mountains toward the valley, the scenery began to change. The dense forest slowly gave way to open fields dotted with wildflowers. Streams widened and the air grew warmer. He could see the smoke rising from chimneys in the distance, marking the presence of the village market. The Mountain Man was not used to crowds, but he was determined to reach the market before the sun climbed too high. He needed to get the best horses before others arrived, for he knew that good animals were always in demand and would not wait for the slow or hesitant. When he arrived at the market, the sounds and smells were immediately overwhelming. The air was filled with the scent of hay, animals, and cooking food. People shouted, calling out prices and trying to attract buyers to their stalls. Children ran about, laughing and playing, dodging between the legs of traders and visitors. Horses neighed and stamped, eager to move, and the clatter of hooves on the stone-paved ground added to the lively chaos. Despite the noise and movement, the Mountain Man felt a calmness settle over him. He was used to observing the world quietly, noticing details others might miss. He took a deep breath and began to move through the market, scanning the horses carefully. Each horse had its own character. Some were restless, stamping and tossing their heads, while others stood quietly, their eyes calm and steady. The Mountain Man approached each one with care, speaking softly and stroking their coats to check their strength and temperament. He had learned over the years that the eyes of a horse could reveal more than its muscles or its gait. A horse with fear or stubbornness would not serve him well on the difficult trails he traveled. Patience was key, both for selecting animals and for understanding their behavior. He walked along the rows of animals, examining their legs, their backs, their teeth, and their hooves. He tapped lightly on their sides and listened to the sounds of their movements. Every detail mattered, for a strong and reliable horse could mean the difference between a safe journey and a dangerous one. As he moved among the horses, traders approached him with offers and suggestions. "This one is young and fast," said one man, gesturing to a chestnut stallion. "It has great stamina for climbing hills." Another trader tried a different tactic, praising the gentle nature of a gray mare. The Mountain Man listened politely, but he did not speak much. He preferred to rely on his own judgment rather than the words of others. He had learned that pride and skill often mattered more than promises. He examined each horse thoroughly, tapping its teeth to check for age, feeling the strength of its muscles, and walking it in small circles to see how it carried its weight. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The market grew busier, and the crowd thickened. Traders shouted louder, trying to attract attention, and the Mountain Man felt a slight unease at the closeness of so many people. Yet his focus remained on the task at hand. He needed horses, and he would not be distracted by the noise or the crowds. He continued his careful inspection, comparing each animal's strength, endurance, and temperament. Some horses were too restless, others too timid, and a few seemed perfect but were priced beyond his budget. He negotiated quietly and with determination, knowing that every deal required both fairness and firmness. As he moved through the market, his eyes wandered briefly to the other activity around him. Families were buying vegetables, baskets of fruits, and freshly baked bread. Blacksmiths were repairing tools and shoeing horses. Children ran about, chasing one another and laughing loudly. Women carried baskets and called out to one another, exchanging news of the village and their families. The mountain man observed all of this with interest, though he did not interact much. He had always been a solitary figure, but he felt a small curiosity about the lives of those who lived so differently from him. Then, as he walked along the edge of the horse stalls, something unusual caught his eye. There, sitting on a wooden fence near the entrance to the market, was a young woman. She was watching the activity with a calm but confident gaze. Her posture was relaxed, yet there was a strength in the way she held herself. She did not seem bothered by the noise or the crowd, as though she belonged to a world entirely her own. The mountain man found himself drawn to her presence, a feeling he had not experienced before. For a moment he forgot the horses, the market, and even the busy sounds around him. He could not take his eyes off her. The woman, noticing him staring, gave a small nod but did not move. She seemed to understand something unspoken, something that connected her to the quiet, strong man who had just appeared among the market stalls. There was a spark of recognition, not of familiarity, but of mutual respect. Both were used to living independently, relying on their own skills and judgment, and both were intrigued by the presence of someone equally strong and capable. The mountain man felt a sense of curiosity and admiration that he could not explain. As he returned his attention to the horses, he found that the usual focus he had on the animals was shifting. He still examined the horses carefully, testing their strength, walking them, and checking their temperament. Yet every so often, his eyes would wander back to the woman on the fence. He wondered about her life, her experiences, and the reasons she was there in the market that day. There was something about her confidence, her quiet strength, and her presence that made him pause and think in ways he rarely did. The hours passed quickly as he continued his inspection. By midday, the sun was high, and the market had reached its busiest point. Traders were raising their voices even more, children were playing in larger groups, and families moved about, carrying their purchases. Yet the mountain man remained focused on his task, balancing his need for horses with the unexpected intrigue that had entered his thoughts. He felt a sense of purpose and determination, but also a new curiosity about life outside the mountains. By the time he had completed his inspection of all the horses, he had made a short list of those that were strong, reliable, and well-suited to his needs. But even as he considered his choices, his thoughts kept returning to the woman on the fence. She was still there, watching the market activity with the same calm and confident demeanor. The mountain man realized that he had not only come to the market for horses, but also, perhaps unknowingly, for an encounter that would change the course of his life. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, he prepared to make his decisions. He had a few horses in mind, but the unusual sight of the woman lingered in his mind. The story of this day, which had begun with a simple journey to buy horses, was becoming something more complex and intriguing. The mountain man felt a mixture of excitement, curiosity, and anticipation. He had come to the market with a clear purpose, but the unexpected sight of someone equally strong and independent had shifted his perspective. He was about to face a decision that would test not only his judgment as a buyer, but also his understanding of life, choice, and connection. By the time he mounted his horse to leave the market, the sun was beginning its descent behind the distant hills. The mountain man knew that this day, like so many others in his life, would be remembered not just for the horses he had considered, but for the unusual encounter that had captured his attention and stirred something deep within him. He did not yet know what would happen next, but he sensed that life had presented him with an unexpected opportunity, one that would take him far beyond the familiar trails of the mountains he had always known. The mountain man could not take his eyes off the woman on the fence. There was something about her that seemed both familiar and mysterious, as if she belonged to the mountains but had wandered into the valley for reasons unknown. She was sitting tall, yet relaxed, her hair catching the sunlight and falling gently over her shoulders. Her eyes scanned the market, observing everything without needing to speak. There was a quiet confidence in her gaze, a calm strength that drew the mountain man's attention more than any of the horses or traders ever could. For a moment he forgot the purpose of his visit entirely. He had come to buy horses, to strengthen his work and prepare for the long journeys back to his home in the highlands. But now he found himself standing still, watching her. She seemed to belong to a different world, one of courage and freedom, yet she was here in the midst of ordinary market life. People passed by, laughing and calling out prices, yet she was unaffected by the noise. She was like a mountain herself, strong, independent, and untamed. The woman noticed his gaze and met his eyes for a brief moment. It was not a look of fear, nor a look of shyness. It was a look of understanding, of recognition between two people who had spent their lives in solitude and had learned to depend on themselves. The mountain man felt a strange warmth rise within him, a mixture of curiosity and admiration. He had seen many people in the market, but none had ever affected him in this way. There was a sense of something important about her presence, something that he could not yet explain. He began to observe her more closely. She shifted slightly on the fence, adjusting her position without losing her balance, showing a physical strength and grace that impressed him. She did not fidget, nor did she seem uncomfortable. Her hands rested lightly on the wooden posts, and her feet, tucked beneath her, balanced with perfect ease. It was clear to him that she was no ordinary woman. She had learned to take care of herself and move through the world with confidence. This thought intrigued him further. He was used to relying on his own skills, his own strength, and he found a rare respect for someone who seemed equally capable. The market around them continued in its busy rhythm. Traders shouted, trying to attract customers to their stalls, and children ran about, their laughter filling the air. Families moved from one section to another, carrying baskets of food and supplies. Horses neighed and stamped, sensing the activity and tension of the crowd. The mountain man, however, remained focused on the woman. He noticed small details, the way she tilted her head slightly when listening, the faint smile that appeared when something amused her, and the way her eyes followed the movement of the market without seeming distracted. Every small gesture told him more about her than words ever could. Curiosity grew in him, mingled with a quiet admiration. He found himself thinking about what it would be like to speak to her, to understand who she was and what had brought her to the market that day. Yet he was also cautious. He had spent most of his life alone in the mountains, and the thought of approaching someone new was both exciting and intimidating. He had learned to respect others, space and independence, and he knew that any interaction had to be handled with care and consideration. Meanwhile, the woman continued to watch the activity around her, occasionally glancing at the mountain man. There was a subtle acknowledgement in her gaze, a silent recognition of the man who had come from the mountains. She seemed aware of his presence, yet she made no overt moves. It was as though she, too, understood the importance of quiet observation, of letting things unfold naturally. The mountain man felt a sense of connection forming, unspoken but real. It was a connection born of mutual understanding and respect, rather than words or formal introductions. He moved closer, pretending to examine a nearby horse, but in reality his eyes remained on her. The woman shifted slightly, noticing his approach, but she did not move away. There was a balance of curiosity and caution between them, a silent dance of observation and recognition. He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had never experienced such a strong reaction to another person before. In the mountains, he was used to solitude, to relying only on himself and his animals. Yet here, in the middle of a busy market, he felt drawn to someone in a way that was entirely new. The traders and villagers around them paid little attention to the small interaction between the mountain man and the woman. They were busy with their own tasks, focused on buying, selling, and moving through the market. The mountain man noticed this and felt a sense of privacy amidst the crowd. It was as if the two of them were in their own world, connected by an unspoken understanding that set them apart from the rest of the market. He appreciated the quiet moments between the noise, the brief exchanges of glances that conveyed more than words ever could. He continued to observe her as he moved through the market, occasionally making small gestures toward the horses but always returning his gaze to her. She remained a constant presence on the fence, a figure of calm strength and quiet curiosity. The mountain man found himself imagining what her life might be like, what skills she had learned, what challenges she had faced, and how she had become the person who could sit confidently on a fence in the middle of a bustling market. Each thought deepened his interest and admiration. Time passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The market grew louder and more crowded, yet the mountain man felt a strange sense of stillness in her presence. She seemed to slow the chaos around them, her calm demeanor creating a pocket of quiet in the midst of noise. He found himself thinking about how rare it was to encounter someone who could have such an effect, someone who seemed grounded, strong, and self-reliant. The thought made him respect her even more. Eventually, he realized that he needed to make a decision. He had come to the market for horses, but he could not ignore the unexpected fascination he felt for the woman on the fence. He felt a sense of destiny, as if their meeting had been arranged by forces beyond his understanding. The mountain man was not a man given to superstition, but he could not deny the unusual significance of this moment. It was a turning point, a moment when his life began to take a direction he had not anticipated. He decided to observe her a bit longer, wanting to understand more about her character before making any moves. He noticed how she interacted with her surroundings, how she responded to children running past, how she glanced at passing traders, and how she seemed completely at ease despite the crowd. Her composure impressed him deeply. He realized that her strength was not just physical, but also mental. She had the kind of presence that commanded respect without needing to assert it. As the afternoon wore on, the mountain man continued to think about the unusual encounter. He realized that he was not simply curious, he was genuinely drawn to her. He admired her independence, her quiet strength, and the way she seemed to belong to herself rather than to anyone else. The mountain man, who had lived most of his life in solitude, felt a rare sense of anticipation and excitement. He knew that this moment could lead to something extraordinary, though he did not yet understand what form it might take. The woman, sitting on the fence, continued to observe the market, but she was also aware of the mountain man's presence. There was a subtle acknowledgement in her eyes, a recognition that he was not like the other people in the market. She sensed his strength, his independence, and his connection to the mountains. In turn, the mountain man sensed her qualities, and the silent understanding between them grew stronger. Each glance, each small movement, built a connection that did not rely on words, but on mutual awareness and respect. Finally, as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the mountain man made his way closer to the fence. He approached with care, speaking softly to himself as he evaluated the situation. He knew that any interaction had to be respectful, and he wanted to understand the woman before speaking to her directly. The crowd around them continued its activity, but for the mountain man and the woman, the world seemed to narrow, focusing entirely on the space between them. As he reached the edge of the fence, he paused, taking in her calm presence once more. She did not flinch or move, and that steadiness gave him confidence. He realized that this encounter was more than chance. It was a moment that might change the course of his life. The mountain man, who had come to the market simply to buy horses, now found himself facing a new kind of challenge, understanding and connecting with someone as strong and independent as himself. He could feel a sense of excitement and nervousness mingling within him. For the first time in many years, he was not thinking only about survival or work. He was thinking about someone else, about a human connection that was rare and precious. He understood that this encounter required patience, observation, and respect. The mountain man had spent his life mastering the mountains, and now he would need to master a different kind of skill, the skill of understanding another person, someone whose strength matched his own. As the afternoon light softened and the market began to prepare for evening, the mountain man and the woman shared a quiet moment of recognition. Though neither spoke, their eyes conveyed understanding, curiosity, and respect. The mountain man knew that this encounter would stay with him long after the market emptied, long after the sun had set behind the distant hills. It was the beginning of something extraordinary, a story of connection and discovery that neither of them could have anticipated. The mountain man stood for a long moment, watching the woman on the fence. He had spent hours in the market, surrounded by the sounds of shouting traders, clattering hooves, and the laughter of children, yet all of that noise seemed distant now. His attention was entirely on her. He had never felt such curiosity, such fascination, or such a strange pull toward another person. It was as though she was a part of the mountains themselves, strong, untamed, and yet perfectly grounded in the world around her. He thought carefully about what he should do next. In the markets of the valley, unusual customs sometimes allowed a man to offer an arrangement for marriage or partnership, in a way that was formal and recognized by the community. It was a tradition that many had grown accustomed to over generations, though it required careful negotiation, respect, and agreement from both sides. The mountain man, who had spent most of his life alone among the peaks, knew little about such arrangements. But he understood enough to recognize that if he wished to pursue a connection with this remarkable woman, he would have to act boldly yet thoughtfully. He stepped closer to the fence, moving carefully so as not to startle her. She noticed his approach but did not move. Her calm demeanor only strengthened his admiration. He stopped a few feet away and spoke softly, more to himself than to her. "I have come for horses, but it seems I have found something far rarer," he said quietly, his voice low and steady. Though the words were simple, they carried a weight of sincerity and respect. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if acknowledging that she had heard him, though she remained silent. The mountain man realized that he needed to find a way to communicate his intentions clearly and respectfully. He did not wish to frighten her or overstep her independence. In the mountains, he had learned the value of patience, observation, and careful action. He had studied the movements of animals, the patterns of the weather, and the rhythms of nature. Now, he applied the same lessons to human interaction. He waited, watching her expression, noting the calm confidence in her eyes and planning his next words carefully. Finally, he spoke again, this time addressing her directly. "You seem strong and capable, unlike anyone I have met," he said. "I would like to know you better, to share life with someone who understands the world as I do." His words were not a demand, nor a boast. They were a simple statement of his admiration and desire for companionship. The woman regarded him steadily, her expression unreadable, yet he could sense a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. The market around them continued its lively activity, but the mountain man and the woman existed in a small world of their own. Traders continued to call out prices, children continued to play, and horses continued to stamp and neigh. Yet within this noise, there was a quiet understanding building between the two. It was an understanding born of observation, mutual respect, and recognition of each other's strength. Neither spoke in haste. Both were careful, aware that this moment was unusual and important. The mountain man decided to make his intentions clear in a way that respected her independence. He spoke softly but firmly, explaining that he admired her courage and self-reliance, and that he wished to form a partnership based on mutual respect and trust. He offered her the choice, making it clear that any agreement would be entered willingly, not out of pressure or obligation. The woman listened carefully, her gaze steady. There was a moment of silence, as if she were weighing her own feelings, her own thoughts, and the possibilities before her. She finally spoke, her voice calm but strong. "I have lived my life with independence and purpose," she said. "I will not give that up easily. But I see in you a strength and honesty that is rare. If we are to be together, it must be on terms that respect both of us." The mountain man nodded, understanding completely. He had not expected anything less, and he admired her even more for her courage and clarity. In that moment, he realized that this was not a simple transaction or an impulsive decision. It was the beginning of a partnership between two people who valued freedom, respect, and strength. They began to negotiate the terms of their arrangement, carefully discussing how they would live, what each expected, and how they would support one another. The mountain man spoke of life in the mountains, the work that needed to be done, and the ways he could share his knowledge and skills. The woman spoke of her own experiences, her abilities, and the kind of life she wished to lead. Their conversation was calm, deliberate, and respectful, reflecting the care they each took in understanding the other. As they spoke, the mountain man felt a growing admiration for her wisdom and insight. She was not simply agreeing to his proposal. She was shaping the partnership in a way that honored her own independence and values. He realized that this was exactly the kind of relationship he had been seeking, even if he had not known it before. It was a partnership of equals, built on trust, respect, and shared strength. The villagers and traders around them began to notice the unusual interaction. Whispers spread through the market about the mountain man, a solitary figure known for his strength and skill, and the woman on the fence, who had agreed to speak with him on her own terms. Some were surprised, others curious, but all could see that there was a unique connection forming. Yet neither the mountain man nor the woman seemed concerned with gossip. Their focus was entirely on each other, on the decisions they were making, and on the future they were beginning to imagine together. As the afternoon sun moved lower in the sky, the mountain man made a quiet, bold decision. He offered to take the woman with him to the mountains, not as a possession or a prize, but as a partner. He promised to respect her independence, to value her judgment, and to support her in every way possible. His offer was sincere, free of coercion, and filled with the quiet strength that had defined his life in the mountains. The woman considered his words carefully, noting the honesty and commitment in his tone. She recognized that he was unlike anyone she had met before, and that the opportunity he presented was unusual and rare. After a long pause, she nodded slightly, a gesture of agreement, but not of submission. It was a decision made on her own terms, with her own understanding of what it meant. She agreed to accompany him to the mountains, to explore the possibility of a life together, and to form a bond based on mutual respect and shared purpose. The mountain man felt a surge of gratitude and excitement, knowing that he had found someone who matched his own strength and independence, someone who could walk beside him through the challenges of mountain life and beyond. The traders and villagers watched in amazement as the two prepared to leave the market together. It was an unusual sight, a mountain man and a strong, confident woman choosing each other in a way that combined tradition, respect, and personal choice. Some whispered about the boldness of the decision, others about the curiosity of the market, but all could see that this was a partnership formed by mutual admiration rather than convenience or obligation. As they began to move toward the edge of the market, the mountain man felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had spent his life in the mountains, accustomed to the solitude and the predictability of nature. Now he was about to enter a new phase of life, one that involved trust, connection, and shared experience with someone he deeply respected. The woman, walking beside him, seemed equally aware of the significance of the moment. She carried herself with confidence, yet there was a sense of anticipation in her step. Together, they moved through the bustling market, each step bringing them closer to a future that was unknown but full of promise. They paused briefly at the edge of the village, looking back at the market one last time. The sounds of shouting traders and playful children were fading, replaced by the quieter rhythm of the open path leading back toward the mountains. The mountain man felt a sense of calm settle over him. He had come to the market with a simple purpose to find horses, but he was leaving with something far more valuable, a partner, a companion, and a connection that would change his life. The woman walked beside him, her presence steady and reassuring. She was no longer just a figure on a fence. She was someone who had chosen to walk with him, someone whose strength matched his own. As they moved away from the market, the mountain man felt a new sense of responsibility and purpose. He would need to guide her through the challenges of mountain life, just as she would bring her own knowledge, courage, and perspective to the partnership. Together, they would face the wilderness, the unpredictable weather, and the many tasks that life in the mountains demanded. But the mountain man was not afraid. He felt a quiet confidence, knowing that they would support each other, learn from each other, and grow together in ways neither could have imagined before this unusual day in the valley market. The path ahead was long and filled with uncertainty, yet it was also full of possibility. The mountain man and the woman shared a quiet understanding as they walked, each step reinforcing their mutual respect and curiosity. They had chosen each other not out of necessity, nor out of convenience, but out of recognition of the qualities that made them unique and strong. It was a beginning forged in honesty, courage, and a shared desire for connection. A beginning that promised adventure, growth, and the deep satisfaction of discovering life with a kindred spirit. The mountain man and the woman began their journey back toward the mountains as the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky. The village market faded behind them, replaced by fields, forests, and winding trails leading toward the high peaks. Each step brought them farther from the noise and chaos of the valley and closer to the quiet, rugged life that the mountain man knew so well. For him, the familiar smell of pine and the sound of rustling leaves were comforting. For her, the journey offered a mix of curiosity and excitement, as she had never spent much time in the untamed wilderness. At first, the mountain man led the way, walking carefully over narrow trails and loose stones. He glanced back occasionally, making sure the woman followed easily, though she moved with confidence and balance. She admired the strength and skill he displayed in navigating the rough paths, and he admired her steadiness, grace, and courage. Together, they began to establish a rhythm, learning how to move through the mountains side by side. It was an unspoken agreement that they would rely on each other, trust each other, and face the challenges ahead as partners. The sun continued to set, casting golden light across the landscape. Shadows stretched across the forest floor, and the crisp mountain air grew cooler. The woman asked questions about the paths, the animals, and the life of the mountains, showing a keen interest in learning. The mountain man, who had spent decades in solitude, explained patiently, sharing stories of the trails, the seasons, and the habits of the wildlife. He described how to identify edible plants, how to find fresh water, and how to anticipate changes in the weather. She listened intently, absorbing his knowledge with a mix of curiosity and respect. As night began to fall, they set up a small camp near a stream. The mountain man built a fire with practiced hands, and the woman helped gather wood and prepare a simple meal. The flickering flames illuminated their faces, casting warm light on the tired but content expressions. They shared stories of their pasts, his life in solitude among the mountains, her experiences in nearby villages, and the lessons they had learned along the way. The conversation flowed easily, blending humor, wisdom, and shared reflection. It was clear that the partnership they had begun at the market was growing into a genuine connection. The stars appeared in the sky, bright and clear against the darkening night. The woman gazed upward, marveling at the vastness of the universe above the mountains. She had never seen such a wide expanse of sky or such an abundance of stars. The mountain man, accustomed to the view, pointed out constellations and shared stories of how the stars guided travelers in the old days. They spoke of the beauty and danger of the mountains, of the freedom that came from living close to nature, and of the importance of understanding and respecting the land. In these quiet moments, their bond deepened, built on shared wonder and mutual admiration. The following days were filled with challenges, but also with moments of discovery and growth. They traveled through forests, crossed streams, and climbed steep ridges. The mountain man taught her how to read the signs of the land, how to follow animal tracks, find safe paths, and anticipate changes in the weather. She adapted quickly, showing skill, courage, and intelligence that impressed him more each day. They shared the work of carrying supplies, gathering food, and setting up camps, learning to rely on each other while also respecting each other's abilities. As they journeyed together, they encountered wildlife, deer grazing in meadows, birds calling from the treetops, and occasionally a bear in the distance. The mountain man taught her how to observe without disturbing, how to respect the animals, and how to stay safe. She absorbed every lesson, her confidence growing with each passing day. He realized that she was not only strong and brave, but also quick to learn, thoughtful, and careful. Their partnership was becoming more than an arrangement. It was a true companionship, built on mutual respect and shared experience. They also shared moments of laughter and playfulness, small joys that lightened the hardships of mountain life. They would race along narrow trails, compete in friendly contests of skill, or tease each other about mistakes. The mountain man, who had rarely experienced such lightheartedness, found himself smiling more than he had in years. The woman, in turn, discovered the joy of adventure and the satisfaction of mastering challenges with a partner she trusted. Together, they celebrated both the beauty of the mountains and the strength of their growing bond. As the seasons began to change, they adapted to new conditions. Rain fell in steady sheets, turning trails into slippery paths and streams into rushing torrents. Snow dusted the peaks, creating both challenges and breathtaking beauty. Through it all, they relied on each other's strengths. The mountain man taught her how to build shelters and stay warm, and she brought her own ingenuity and energy to every task. They faced each difficulty with patience and determination, learning that their combined skills made them stronger than they could ever be alone. Over time, they began to build a small life together in the mountains. They repaired the mountain man's cabin, expanded the space to accommodate them both, and created a home that reflected their shared values and abilities. The woman planted small gardens, gathering herbs and vegetables, while the mountain man hunted, fished, and prepared wood for the winter. Their days were long and filled with work, but they were also full of satisfaction, laughter, and mutual support. The cabin, once a solitary space, became a place of warmth, partnership, and comfort. Neighbors from nearby valleys occasionally visited, curious about the unusual pair. They saw a mountain man known for his solitude, now living with a woman who was equally strong and independent. Some were surprised, others admiring, but all could see that their life together was based on respect and cooperation. The mountain man and the woman welcomed visitors politely, sharing stories of their journeys, their skills, and their experiences. Through these interactions, they became known not only for their strength and independence, but also for the deep partnership that guided their daily lives. As the months passed, their relationship grew deeper. They faced hardships, storms that cut off paths, difficult climbs, and the constant work of living in a challenging environment, but they faced them together. Each challenge strengthened their bond, teaching them patience, cooperation, and the joy of shared achievement. The woman's presence brought new energy and perspective to the mountain man's life, while he provided guidance, support, and stability. Together, they learned that life in the mountains, while difficult, could also be rich, fulfilling, and full of wonder. They also found moments of quiet reflection, sitting together on rocky outcrops and watching the sunset over distant peaks. They spoke of dreams, hopes, and the future, recognizing that their lives had become intertwined in ways neither could have imagined at the market. They celebrated the strength, courage, and wisdom each brought to the partnership, appreciating the rare connection that had begun with a glance on a fence and a decision made with care and respect. Through it all, they never lost their sense of individuality. The mountain man retained his independence, his skills, and his quiet strength, while the woman maintained her courage, her confidence, and her determination. Their relationship was built not on possession or control, but on mutual respect, admiration, and partnership. They learned to move together through the world while honoring the unique qualities each brought to their shared life. As the years passed, their story became a quiet legend in the surrounding valleys. People spoke of the mountain man who had chosen a partner with care and respect, and the woman who had joined him not out of necessity, but out of choice. They became an example of what could be achieved when two independent, strong-willed individuals formed a partnership based on equality, trust, and understanding. Their life together was filled with adventure, work, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection, a life that was both extraordinary and deeply grounded in the rhythms of the mountains. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking, planning, and sometimes simply enjoying the warmth and companionship of each other's presence. They celebrated the simple joys of life: fresh food, clear water, the sight of wildlife, and the beauty of changing seasons. Through every hardship and every triumph, they faced the world together, learning that true partnership was not about dependence, but about shared strength and mutual respect. Eventually, they built a life that was fully their own, rooted in the mountains but open to new possibilities. They welcomed friends, shared their knowledge, and found contentment in a life that was both challenging and rewarding. Their partnership, begun in a moment of bold decision at a village market, had grown into something extraordinary, a life of shared adventure, deep connection, and the quiet satisfaction of two strong individuals finding balance and joy together. The mountain man often reflected on that day in the market when he had first seen her on the fence. What had seemed like a simple journey to buy horses had turned into a life-changing experience. He realized that life could be unpredictable, full of surprises, and that the most valuable things often came when least expected. The woman, too, reflected on that day, recognizing that her choice had led to a life richer and fuller than she could have imagined. Together, they had created a story of courage, respect, and shared strength, a story that would remain in their hearts forever.